Welcome to the Athletic FC podcast for me, Akinwolere. Anfield roared and booed as Liverpool emphatically beat Real Madrid in the Champions League. So could this reignite Liverpool's season? In with us today, we have James Pearce. We've also got Tomás López-Menchero in the studio as well. James, 1-0 scoreline. But, watching that match, I don't know. I don't think 1-0 reflected the intensity of Liverpool. Was it exactly what they needed after what I guess some might describe it as a tough couple of weeks?
Yeah, it's been an absolutely torrid period for them, isn't it? When you think, 4 straight Premier League defeats, and you had that kind of chastening Carabao Cup exit as well, and all the kind of noise and negativity around, had Slot done the right thing by leaving out, pretty much all his big hitters, and how, if anything, it really cranked up the pressure ahead of such a big week, Villa, Real Madrid, Man City. But yeah, he's got exactly the kind of response he wanted. I think it felt like a big step forward against Villa on the weekend, stop the rot, look much more secure. But yeah, that performance against Real Madrid, I don't think anyone could really hand on heart say they saw that coming, because that was by far and away Liverpool's most complete performance, probably since they thrashed Tottenham to secure the Premier League title in April, because they just haven't got close to those levels since. And, in possession, real fluency to them, creative spark, looked dangerous. But probably the biggest change for me was out of possession. They just looked so much more disciplined and organised and compact, where too often this season, teams have just cut through them at will.
Much will be made of also how Wirtz played yesterday. And what do you think changed in his match, in his game? And how do you think Arne Slot utilised him better, more in an optimal way?
Yeah, I thought that was Florian Wirtz's best night in a Liverpool shirt. I think the problem for Slot so far since he brought him in, it has been kind of trying to work out, where he best fits. And of course, when you have him in that number 10 role, it does upset the balance of the midfield, and he hasn't quite been able to get that balance right. Yeah, I thought it worked really well playing him off the left in place of Gakpo. That the combination between him and Andy Robertson, clicked. Wirtz was also given freedom to kind of drift into central areas and find pockets of space, and it was. And I just think as well, going back to the tried and trusted midfield, that three of Gravenberch, McAllister, Szoboszlai, they know each other's game inside out. They were such a huge part of why Liverpool won the Premier League last season. And going back to that has definitely made them more secure. And, I think he's probably now found that probably is the way to get Wirtz into this Liverpool team, to have him playing off one of the sides, because, he was on the left against Real Madrid. You go back a few weeks and he was playing off the right in Frankfurt, and that was another decent night for him.
Yeah, Tomás, let's get the Real Madrid perspective on this one, because look, that's only Madrid's second defeat suffered this season under Alonso. But I'm watching the Valencia game and they thrashed them like 4-0. Then you come into the Champions League, which should be their playground, and you get such a real flat performance. Why do you think they didn't translate that league form to Champions League form?
Yeah, I think the Champions League for a while now has been something totally different to La Liga. They're certainly not used to facing a team with that kind of intensity as Liverpool. Obviously, James has just been talking about their kind of recent slump, but even so, this is still a star-studded team full of intensity. I think that was maybe the thing that worried fans the most, the lack of intensity, kind of reminiscent of the 5-2 defeat to Atletico earlier this season. Even though Alonso kind of claimed they were totally different things. But yeah, the worry for Madrid will be that this is another big game which they've lost. Okay, they won the Clásico 2-1, but that was against a Barca team with a lot of injuries. Obviously thrashed by PSG in the Club World Cup semi-finals in the summer. So that's the worry. And I guess it's also fair to say that Mbappe has had a brilliant season. He just wasn't firing in this one. Not many of their stars were. I think maybe that is ultimately what ends up being the difference here.
Yes, it's becoming a bit of a rivalry. You think about the amount of times these two teams have met, and it always feels rather special. If I'm honest, like outside looking in, you're seeing Anfield just get up on itself because they know how powerful and how difficult this opponent is. Does it feel like that for Madrid?
No, definitely. I think these are two teams that see themselves as European royalty, that are European royalty in many ways. I think in Spain, a lot is made of the Anfield atmosphere. That's seen as a real kind of temple of football, as they say. So that is a big thing. I think any time Madrid face an English team is going to be a huge test, big occasion. City they've faced so many times and are facing again in the league phase. So yeah, those two games kind of are becoming like European classicos almost.
Yeah. We have to talk about Conor Bradley, James. We'll talk about Trent a little later on, but I mean, how fitting was it that he was the fullback that pocketed Vinny Jr. and considering that's where, Trent Alexander-Arnold, who was a substitute, was sitting. I mean, the Anfield crowd, every time he made a tackle, just roared for him.
Yeah, they did, and he really just fed off that kind of outpouring of energy and emotion from the stands. That was the best night of Conor Bradley's Liverpool career. I think, people will think back to Real Madrid's visit to Anfield last November, if you remember rightly, probably the iconic image that night was Bradley dumping Mbappe on his backside with a crunching challenge. But in terms of a full 90-minute performance, that was on a whole different level this time around, because Vinicius is one of the most dangerous attacking players in world football, and I think you only had to look at the first 10 or 15 minutes. I lost count of the number of times Madrid shifted it out to the left-hand side. Clearly that was part of the game plan, believing you could get at Bradley and unsettle him. Yet Vinicius, in the end, he went from being lively early on to completely losing heart because Bradley absolutely pocketed him. I thought it was just a sensational display of controlled aggression from Bradley. And not only that, he did his job defensively, but he was a real outlet going forward as well with those underlapping runs of his, the way he combined with Salah, some of the deliveries from him into the feet of Ekitike as well. Yeah, that was a big one for Bradley because of course there's been, he was earmarked as kind of the Alexander-Arnold heir apparent, but that coronation hasn't really taken place up to now because he did his hamstring in pre-season, missed the start of the season, and then when he had played mid-September onwards, he just really couldn't get going. There was a lack of rhythm, a lack of form. I was looking back before, I think he got 5 yellows in his first 8 appearances this season, and that it just kind of spoke to someone who was just a bit rash, a bit off the pace in games. He was getting hauled off. Slot was having to use Szoboszlai as a makeshift right back, and then that has the knock-on effect of weakening the midfield. So, I think getting Bradley up to speed is it was always going to be key to Liverpool getting more stability through the team. And now I think as a Liverpool fan, you just want to see him build on it because the frustration a year ago was he was brilliant against Real Madrid and then did his hamstring and didn't play again for 6 weeks. Now he's had 2 big performances against Villa and Real Madrid. The challenge is, can he now go and do it again at the Etihad on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, Liverpool restricted Real Madrid, Thomas, to just 2 shots on target, considering the attacking prowess they've got. But I wonder if there's a wider conversation about how Xabi Alonso has got this team playing to his tune and whether or not this is still a team in that tradition, in his likeness. But also, I think about his Champions League experience coaching a team. Leverkusen, obviously, he had experience with, but perhaps this shows his limited knowledge of the competition as a coach, as a manager.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say. I think it's also true that there's a lot of inexperience in that team, full stop, right? I mean, I think in the defence alone, Carreras and Howson, the left back and centre back, both under 22 years old, Gula 20 years old. So, and that was a bit of a point was made about that after the game, about the kind of amount of unnecessary fouls that maybe they'd conceded, which I think comes down to inexperience as well. But yeah, clearly it's a work in progress under Alonso. I think he took on a big rebuilding project because Ancelotti, for all of his success as Alonso's predecessor, by the time he leaves, you have got a pretty aging defence. Some youngsters not playing so much. I mean, Gula has played so much under Alonso and looked brilliant with Mbappe.
When you say rebuilding, is that also in terms of style of play as well? Is that what you're thinking, having to teach them a new way of working?
Yeah, totally. I mean, fair to say, I think that Ancelotti's approach was more laissez-faire. I can't really remember the last time a coach like Alonso came in with this kind of project, wanting to change the team's style of play completely. And often that actually goes against the grain of how Madrid have been successful. Often it's been managers who kind of just let the individual stars do their thing. So, it's a work in progress. He's experienced teething issues and, kind of off-field issues that I'm sure we'll discuss later in the pod. But yeah, the signs are good, but these big game defeats are really what he'll be measured by a lot of people in Madrid, and what will make some fans worry for now.
Yeah, we have to talk about the reception Trent got when he came on. The boos were absolutely deafening. There was also a mural of Trent defaced in the lead up to the game, James. You were at the stadium. I watched it on TV and I thought it was so loud. A few claps, but really majority boos. How strong was the reaction in there?
I thought it was very predictable. I think, you go back to the kind of final weeks of his Liverpool career, and there was this debate, wasn't there, about whether it was the right thing to do, to kind of voice your frustration and your anger that a lot of fans felt over the fact that he decided to leave for Real Madrid. And if you remember rightly, of course, he was booed by a significant number of fans against Arsenal after the title had been won, yet then had a really positive final day of the season when the trophy lift and got the kind of send-off he kind of wanted. But I just think the rules of engagement were always going to be different this time around with him coming back in, the white strip of Real Madrid. I was slightly baffled by, some pundits coming out and saying, I really hope he has, he deserves a great reception. It's like, we talked before about, you mentioned about the rivalry between Liverpool and Real Madrid. They've met each other in, 2 Champions League finals in the last 7 years. It's not a situation where it's like, he's just gone to, to someone that's got no relevance to Liverpool. He's gone to one of the clubs who probably one of only 4 or 5 who could potentially stop Liverpool from winning the Champions League this season. So there was always going to be, a really hot reception for him. So it didn't surprise me. And yeah, it was pretty merciless. When he stepped on, it was a real booming, rendition of jeers and boos that then grew louder and louder with every touch that he had. The ironic cheers when he misplaced a pass and then overhit a cross in stoppage time. But yeah, I think there'll probably be a time at some point in the future when Trent Alexander-Arnold does return to Liverpool and is welcomed back with open arms. But I just think that is a long way off because it's still pretty raw. The fact that he left a Liverpool team, and I think a lot of fans that I speak to say they kind of would have accepted it maybe if Liverpool were in the doldrums, and it was like there were times obviously when Steven Gerrard could have left to win more and didn't and showed incredible loyalty, but it was like I think what kind of affected a lot of Liverpool fans that they felt that Liverpool have just won the Premier League. Why do you need you grew up in the city? Why do you need to walk away at this point? Now, of course, I completely understand the flip side of that Trent's talked about. The new challenge, going to live in another country, you're going to test yourself. You can't get away from the fact Real Madrid are the biggest football club in the world. But Liverpool football is a tribal sport, isn't it? No, there's no real kind of you can't always kind of give logic to everything because people will be so wedded to there is nothing beyond the club that they support, and they will never be able to get their head around that a local lad decided to walk away from that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know what that feels like personally, but Virgil van Dijk also, I don't know, sometimes I wonder where people are just adding more fire to the flames here at the end of the match. He was asked, did you see Trent before the match or plan to do so? And just answered no. Do you think that was the right thing to do? I mean, he could have just because for me, fans are one thing, James, but you can also as a club, as players or whatever, just diffuse that because there is still a human being who's going to play football on that field.
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty blunt from Virgil van Dijk, wasn't it? And it was, to be fair, he was a similar sentiment. I spoke to him in the mix zone after the game against Aston Villa on Saturday and asked him whether he would be having any contact with Trent ahead of the game. And he was asked, have you had any contact with him since he's gone to Real Madrid? And he pretty much said, no, he's got his life. He's got his life in Madrid. I've got my life here. He decided to leave, and we all moved on. And I think it's a tricky balancing act for Virgil van Dijk, because we know how much it means to him to be Liverpool captain, that he sees himself as the figurehead. And of course, he knows how emotions are running very high amongst the fan base. And, I remember when he gave an interview after a game towards the back end of last season, Virgil, when he was, he was quite emphatic then when he just signed his own contract extension, where he said, for me, I don't really understand why anyone would want to leave Liverpool, because this is the place to be. So, I think that is very much kind of the way that he sees things. But yeah, it's fair to say that, some other players, and even Slot himself, said afterwards, I gave Trent a hug and I'll always only have positive things to say about him. But yeah, Virgil's assessment was pretty short and sweet.
Yeah. What do you make of it all, Thomas? I know you're not a Liverpool fan necessarily, but from the outside looking in, it's still a human being on that field regardless, but you can also understand the heat and the passion the fans feel for one of their own leaving.
Yeah, definitely. And I can totally take, what James says there about how Liverpool fans are feeling. It's very raw emotions. I'm sure Madrid fans would feel a similar way if there was a player that they'd brought up who went the other way. Having said that, I think with my La Liga hat on, Barca and Madrid, it is a different kind of kettle of fish to those Premier League teams. You look at how Rashford has settled in at Barcelona this season, how he's talked about the club. I think those two are still seen as the ultimate for a lot of players. And clearly, Alexander-Arnold is taking this challenge extremely seriously. The fact that he was already speaking Spanish at his presentation, which I know
that helped though. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm clearly speaking Spanish. Clearly, he's been doing it for quite a while before he left.
Help with Madrid fans, certainly. But but I think it is a sign of how he's taking it seriously. He's taking this new challenge seriously. It's not. I'm sure it will have been a decision that he thought about for a long time. And yeah, as I say, those two clubs still hold a certain allure for players that I think we as fans have to understand, even if La Liga is not at the level of the Premier League at the moment. Now, it's true that he hasn't had the easiest time settling in at Madrid. Yeah, I can see both sides, but I do ultimately think it's harsh towards a player who has achieved so much for Liverpool.
Well, let's assess how Liverpool signings have done so far. Ekitike, Wirtz, Isak, Kerkez and Frimpong are the main ones. Who's overwhelmed, who's underwhelmed you out of that group there, James?
Ekitike has definitely been the pick of the new arrivals so far. He's been a revelation really since joining Liverpool. Just looks the part. I think he's got a real. Sometimes with players, especially when they arrive at Liverpool for big money, there can be that kind of bit of a culture shock, I guess, coming from from where he came from at Eintracht Frankfurt, in terms of the pressure and scrutiny and expectation levels that come with playing for Liverpool. But he's just fitted straight in. Yeah, I think Wirtz has shown flashes of it so far. I don't think he's been anywhere near as bad as some of the criticism that's come his way. And I just think with Wirtz as well, it's pretty naive of anyone to think that just because he cost such a crazy amount of money that he just comes in and lights the place up straight away, because we know what a difference it is coming from where he was at, moving away from home for the first time. Still only 22 as well. I think people forget with Wirtz, and also having to try and fit into a team that hasn't been functioning particularly well. Mamardashvili obviously has played a fair bit with Alisson's injury issues.
Yes, the keeper, yeah. But it's weird. We don't class him as a new signing because it felt like that was done so long ago, right?
Yeah, and I'd say he's got better. I think there's certainly been a few goals that he's conceded during this run in the team where you couldn't help but watch it and think, Alisson keeps that out, which probably gives you a newfound appreciation of just how good he is. But I think the last couple of games has been, he has kind of commanded his box to a greater extent, Mamardashvili, and made some important saves. Kerkez has had a tough time. I think I was surprised that Slot kept faith with him. He almost wanted him. I got the impression he wanted him to almost play through a difficult spell. He's kind of now gone in a different direction with Robertson being recalled, and Liverpool look much, much better for it. But again, Kerkez is still so young, and people have short memories. Lots of players in the Klopp era needed 3 or 4 months to get to grips with it. Robertson was a case in point when he first arrived from Hull City. So Frimpong has had a tough time for different reasons. Just hasn't been able to stay fit. He's had two hamstring problems. But yeah, I think it's been a mixed bag so far. But I just think with so much, it was such a turbulent summer for a whole host of reasons that I think it was always going to take a while for some of those new faces to fit in.
Yeah, what do you think of their signings, Thomas? I mean, there's no better team than Real Madrid, really, who know how to deal with big signings. Sometimes not big money signings because of the way they do their business, but they are big egos. They are big players. What do you think of the work Arne Slot's been doing so far?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like it was a more Galactico-esque summer almost than Madrid signings. I think if you look at Madrid signings, big outlay as well, 180 million euros, but mostly on kind of younger, slightly inexperienced players. You've got Howson, who's played in the Premier League, obviously Carrera's in the Champions League with Benfica, but I think those are younger, more inexperienced players than the ones Liverpool brought in, who I think at the time, maybe the outside perspective was that they were coming in to basically make this well-oiled title-winning machine even better. Clearly, at the moment, it's been a bit of, as James says there, kind of teething issues. It's taken a bit of time, but yeah, I have no doubt that those signings, once they're up to full speed, are going to make Liverpool even better. And I think the one that is interesting is Wirtz. I think there were rumours in the summer definitely that he could be joining Alonso at Madrid. Whether there was any truth to that, but he's certainly a player who Spanish fans really admire, and hopefully this performance against Real Madrid can be the one that kind of catapults his Liverpool career to new heights.
Yeah, I mean, I do think about the pressures we put on people in football, and I'm also thinking about the Liverpool manager. Are we a bit harsh on Arne Slot? Because this is the kind of one that the Premier League last season, first time in the Premier League, and actually had quite a decent Champions League run as well.
No, definitely. I mean, I'm coming from a perspective of a manager being criticised for, only 2 defeats all season. So yeah, perhaps I'm not the person to ask. But yeah, I do think we're being harsh on him. He's also up against an Arsenal side managed by Arteta, who was strengthened significantly in the summer, who are going to take advantage of any minor slip up. Clearly, there have been a few. But yeah, I would say that we need to give him a bit more respect for what he did in his first season. It's been a tough summer, as we said, also summer of transition with players, and that's going to take time to adapt to. No club knows that better than Real Madrid, although those above probably don't share the same opinion.
Yeah, I can imagine. Big one, James, on Sunday at the Etihad. I'm going to be in Manchester actually on Friday to preview it. I mean, this feels like a defining one, really, to kickstart that sort of league form properly, to show the consistency, to show the fluidity. Away at the Etihad, when Manchester City are actually looking like they're gathering steam, could be a real tricky one for Liverpool.
Yeah. It's a massive end, isn't it, to what's a huge week, especially going into the international break, because that whatever happens at the Etihad on Sunday, whether it's a massive morale boosting win or an energy sapping defeat, it's going to linger for a fortnight. But yeah, and Liverpool looking a much better shape than when this fixture was kind of looming on the horizon a couple of weeks ago. And of course, they'll have happy memories of their last visit there back in February when they went there, won in the Premier League for the first time. I think it was in a decade since they'd won at the Etihad in a league match, and outplayed and outfought City on the day. Of course, City now are a much better, resurgent force under Guardiola, helped by, of course, Klopp's former sidekick Pep Linders, who will be up against Liverpool for the first time. So yeah, I certainly don't envisage, maybe one possible change. You think will he be tempted to slot maybe to bring back in Gakpo? But you'd have thought, having found this winning formula against Villa and against Real Madrid, I'd be absolutely shocked if he significantly changed it. And he will know, because if they can go there and put on a display and win, talk about changing the mood. It's that really, when you think, people were talking about Liverpool being an absolute crisis off the back of those 4 straight Premier League defeats and going out the Carabao Cup, and then suddenly now, they go to the Etihad with 3 wins out of 4 in the Champions League, 3rd place in the Premier League, 7 points to Arsenal. Yes, Arsenal look very strong, but there's a long, long way to go. And if they can put one over City, it would send out a hell of a statement.
Yeah, I've just received a note from our producer, Mike, saying Haaland 2 goals away from 100 Premier League goals. Eek, Thomas. I mean, it's a tough one away for Liverpool, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with Haaland in that kind of form, I think him and Mbappe at the moment got to be two best forwards in world football. It really does seem like it. I know that Haaland was kind of brushing off those Messi and Ronaldo comparisons, but it's sort of getting to those levels, isn't it, of a player that picks up the ball and you just know he's going to score, basically. I mean, it's very different to Messi in some ways, but probably maybe more similar to Ronaldo, that kind of thing of just picking it up anywhere. But yeah, huge test for Liverpool, and real test of this recent mini revival that they've had.
Fantastic. James, before you go, I know you're one of the stars of our Liverpool podcast, Walk On, and also you got a book coming out as well. So here's your opportunity to plug that book. Let people know what it's about and where they can find it.
Thank you. Yeah. It's released on Thursday this week. Walk On Inside Arne Slot's Liverpool. So it kind of took over my life this summer, doing it after the end of the season up to when the new season started in the middle of August. So yeah, it's the story really of kind of how Liverpool and FSG handled that transition from one era to another. The kind of the handling of Jurgen Klopp's departure, the story of Michael Edwards' return as FSG CEO of football, the importance of bringing in Richard Hughes as sporting director, and then kind of the rise of Arne Slot, looking at his past, his kind of formative years in Holland, and then what he changed when he came to Liverpool, speaking to lots of people from, the ownership through to executives, players and staff, to kind of try and build a picture of the season in terms of how they were able to surpass all expectations. Because, of course, lots of rival fans were thinking, this is going to be the toughest transition any club has faced since Alex Ferguson stepped down from Manchester United. Yet, it was seamless in terms of how they ran away with the Premier League title. So, kind of the story of kind of how they did it. And hopefully it's I'm hoping it will help Liverpool have had a slight upturn in fortunes, because as a mate rather unhelpfully messaged me a few weeks ago. They said, would it be a problem for you if Slot went before the book came out?
At least stay to the end of the season, man, for James's book.
No, I think that was tongue in cheek, because I don't think anyone seriously thought that Arne Slot's job was in jeopardy. But yeah, it's I think it's also why there's plenty in that, I think, as well, that kind of points to why there was absolutely no hint of panic behind the scenes at Liverpool during this current dip that they had, because of the belief they have in Slot. And I do think one of the many disrespectful things that I keep seeing online is this idea that he just won the league with Klopp's team. And it's like, this is kind of, I'd like to think this kind of book should put to bed that idea that all he did was say to them, well, just, go out and do whatever you did under Jurgen. That'll be fine, when people forget the fact that Liverpool actually, trailed off pretty badly towards the end of the Klopp era. And it was Arne Slot who absolutely revived them. So yeah, hopefully something that will be well received by Liverpool fans from Thursday onwards.
Yeah, Liverpool fans and those who have doubted Slot's brilliance as well. Make sure you go check out James Pearce's book. All right, cheers, James. Appreciate your time, and we'll catch you soon, mate.
Thanks, guys.
Well, Thomas, let's turn our attention to Madrid. Now 3 wins from 4 in the Champions League, first in La Liga, 2 defeats all season. Yet the Athletic has reported of the tensions between Alonso and some of the squad. Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, I know that it seems ridiculous from the outside, doesn't it, that a coach who's only lost two games all season could be in this kind of position. But I think it speaks to, what's always bubbling under the surface at Madrid, the kind of player-coach tensions. I don't think that's something new, by the way. I think under multiple managers that has always been something that threatens to bubble over, and it's why Madrid have so often turned to coaches who place their faith in kind of the individuals. But yeah, basically, Mario's piece detailed how several sources said players were upset about kind of having less freedom now under Alonso than under Ancelotti. There was this great quote by an individual close to a senior Madrid player saying he thinks he's Pep Guardiola, but for now he's just Xabi, which, it seems kind of pretty brazen from the outside. I do think it's just a group of players, a group of really successful players, many of whom have won the Champions League twice already, just kind of getting used to and experiencing teething problems in getting used to a totally new way of playing under Alonso, who is an inexperienced coach. He is a very successful coach though already in his short career, as we know. So I think it comes down to that, two very different ways of doing things from Ancelotti to Alonso. I guess it's worth pointing out though that things under Ancelotti last season weren't so great. They finished, trophyless, or at least without having won any of the major trophies. So a change was needed. Alonso's got this big project on his hands. He needs time. I think those tensions were kind of shown up a bit by that Vinicius outburst at the Clásico when he was subbed off. But look, it's a coach who's doing things his way. Maybe that's going to rub some players up the wrong way, but it's an interesting battle, and we'll see what happens. I mean, if battle is the right word, because I think Alonso has poured water on it. He's been very diplomatic in his press conferences. He'll know better than most the everyday issues that occur at Madrid like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. Like, he's only been there a short period of time. I mean, you've got to let the guy figure out what he's doing there, how he's going to, give people his philosophy. I mean, I just don't like getting too far ahead of myself, especially so early in the season. But let's talk about the players then, because we've touched on Vinny, we've touched on Trent, not really starting much. The one that baffles me is Endrick. Like, this Brazilian wonder kid that Real Madrid brought, barely played by Alonso.
Yeah, it has been odd. I mean, Alonso obviously had a lot of faith in Gonzalo Garcia, the young striker who played at the Club World Cup, became top scorer in kind of amazing circumstances. Endrick was injured at the time. My colleague Mario wrote a great piece about what's been going on in those kind of 5 months where he didn't play. He finally did play at the weekend against Valencia, 11 minutes. So it's not much, but you're right that they spent a lot of money on him. So they will want that to go well. He seemed to be another one of those kind of Juni Calafat Brazilian recruits who you expected to go from strength to strength, and it hasn't quite gone like that. We reported interest from Lyon last week in the January transfer window. So let's see what happens. My personal opinion is that he does offer something a bit different off the bench, but Alonso clearly for now seems to think differently.
Yeah, does he have a bit of a problem though? I mean, it's a team stacked with players, but also players in some pretty important positions. I always think about Valverde, who played last night in the right back position. He's a midfielder. He wants to play in the midfield, but then you've got this kind of dilemma where you're like, it's also just got to play them. A little bit like Liverpool, where you see Szoboszlai playing, as a right back, for instance. It's just too many stars for 11 players to fit on a field.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, you look at Rodrigo as well, who came off the bench last night. He has been underperforming, but again, it's yet another great attacker. He's got Gula barely featured under Ancelotti last season. Under Alonso, he's a player transformed. Him and Mbappe have formed this really nice partnership. So, yeah, I guess I would caution against reading too much into that Liverpool defeat as well, because again, it's another big game defeat. Clearly, that is worrying. But as you say, otherwise, Alonso's start has been super impressive. He's got a big job on his hands. He's trying to fit a lot of star players into this one team. Valverde is a good point, because he would prefer to play as a midfielder, but clearly he's having to be used where Alonso needs him, with Alexander-Arnold kind of not having quite found his feet. So yeah, it's an intriguing challenge for him.
Okay, let's leave it there. Do not write Real Madrid out of the Champions League yet. We know their pedigree. Tomás, appreciate your time, and also James, appreciate you joining us earlier as well. And also thank you guys for watching. We'll be back soon. For more from the Athletic FC podcast, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. We've got top journalists like David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the entire season. Make sure you don't miss an episode of the Athletic FC. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts from.